While everybody settles in, I'm just going to go through the usual housekeeping announcements. So, if I can remind everybody present, please, that this remote meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet. And this recording then is going to be archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please can they use the remote raise hand function located in the bottom left-hand side of the screen? This will put you into the speaker queue accordingly. And when subsequently you are invited to address by myself, please then press your activation button in the bottom center of your screen. Please be patient and aware there'll be a small time lag and that you don't need to press the button again. The response of the system isn't instant, and if the button or desk microphone changes to red, then it has responded. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to address by myself, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. And when they're invited to address by myself, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If that's not possible, please bring that to my attention or to the Democratic Services Officer. Once you've participated, remember to turn your activation button off. It's not to delay other participants from coming onto the screen and to avoid background noises when other participants are speaking. So as we move forward into our agenda, I'll start with part one, which is our apologies for absence. Have we had any today, please?
None through to myself, Chair.
Councillor Johnson?
Hi, Cynghorydd Prothero.
Christopher Adams has got in touch with me to say he's having troubles logging in. I don't know whether Liz or another member of staff can help him logging in.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Let's move then on to agenda item 2. That's minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of January.
Oh, excuse me, sorry, I did raise my hand. Could I just bring apologies for Councillor Nick Woods, please?
And Councillor Woods. No problem. Thank you, Councillor Fisher.
Noted on both counts, thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Okay then, no other apologies for absence? No? Okay. So, but the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of January. For those who were at the meeting, and I really apologise to all that that I couldn't be there, can I just have a hand to move if you're happy with the contents of those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards and Councillor Goodjohn. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 3. That's the declarations of interest and nature of such interest. Do we have any tonight, please, committee? No? That's great. Okay. We'll move on to the first of our agenda items then, which is a presentation that we are going to enjoy now on our school budgets. A little bit of background information for people who may be viewing this today. During our resources scrutiny meeting back in July 2025, and in connection with an item agenda on the closure of accounts, we had a lengthy discussion on the continuation of the trend for overspending, and that was in terms of education and the deficit position of our school budgets. We all acknowledged at the time that there were many reasons why this was continuing to happen, and that there was additional funding and supportive action that the authority was taking. But we felt that this had reached a point now that we needed more information, and that we asked if our education director could come back to committee in a couple of months' time to just give us a bit more detail on this and what actually they were doing to help and support our schools through this difficult situation. So I'm pleased tonight that we're being joined by our Director of Learning, Liz Jones, and also our newly appointed Head of Strategy, Community Learning and Resources, Matthew Curtis, who I understand is going to be taking us through this presentation tonight. So welcome, Matthew, and can I give you the floor, please? Thank you.
Diolch, Chair, noswaith dda bawb. While the slides are coming up, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Matt Curtis. I started with the Vale of Glamorgan Council just 2 weeks ago, albeit I did work for the Vale of Glamorgan Council previously in education up until 2021. So I've essentially returned after nearly 5 years away in Welsh Government and working in other local authorities. Liz, are you able to put the slides up?
Yes, sure. We'll do it from our side. You should now see
Brilliant.
a screen that is waiting for the presentation slide itself. If you just give that a moment, this should be with you in a second.
Excellent. There we are. So if we could move on to the next slide. This is just a kind of general update on school funding and gives a bit of an overview of these current school balances and the progress that has been made over the kind of last 6 months, and then talks a little bit about next steps and how we're moving forward, because this is an item that is a critical risk item for the council. So just for a bit of wider context, and there's a link included within these slides to go and have a look at this document, but the WLGA published the State of Education in Wales paper last year. And it is a really interesting document because it does show the kind of widespread challenges across Wales around school funding. I won't go into detail on it, but of course, some of the headlines here, you have around a third of primary schools go into deficit budgets, and around half secondary schools indicating that they're going into deficit budgets. So, it's a really challenging context around Wales. Some of the areas explored in terms of the reasoning for that are around growth in additional learning needs and pressures around meeting needs of learners, additional transport costs, out-of-county placements. So, a very challenging context across the board. That all local authorities are dealing with, but there are some particular challenges in terms of the funding in the local authority here in the Vale of Glamorgan. So if we could move on to the next slide. This kind of indicates that point, because this table here shows the budgeted expenditure per pupil in each local authority across Wales for the last financial year, or this financial year that we're still in. And it does show that the Vale of Glamorgan Council is 18th out of 22 local authorities in terms of the spend per pupil. So we are, of course, considerably below the Wales average. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that our funding per pupil is lower that comes from Welsh Government, because we don't attract large sums of money around the two big pots that make the big variation to the fund, a lot of the variation to the funding, which is around deprivation and sparsity. So that does make some of the challenges unique, although there are 4 local authorities that have less funding per pupil within their areas. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. This shows a very different position in terms of additional learning needs. The budgeted expenditure per pupil on ALN provision by local authority, the Vale of Glamorgan is really high. So we're 4th of the local authorities, albeit when you look down into delegated expenditure, so what we're spending out in schools on ALN and SEN, that is, we're actually 2nd. So it does show a large imbalance there in terms of we're one of the lowest funded local authorities, but a really high spend in terms of ALN need, which does make the challenge really difficult. If we could please move on to the next. So kind of just a very light summary slide here in terms of how school funding works. So local authorities, of course, distribute funding to schools in a delegated budget. So we delegate funding directly to schools for them to spend as they see fit to deliver the education they need to. This is the total amount that gets allocated to schools is identified through the council's education budget, but we also do receive a range of grants as well directly from Welsh Government that we pass through to schools to fund certain things like deprivation. So we allocate the majority of funding to schools through an agreed funding formula. There are a lot of rules and regulations around how we allocate that funding to schools. So for starters, we have to, at least 70% of the funding needs to be distributed based on pupil numbers, so that creates a fairness in terms of how we allocate funding. But there are also strict rules in terms of what should be delegated and the freedom that the schools should have in terms of how they spend that delegated funding. We consult our school's budget forum and governing bodies and head teachers on changes to the school funding formula. So whenever we make a change, there's a consultation that goes along with that to implement that change. And it's a very robust and an open process with our schools. School budget forum meets around 4 or 5 times a year. There was a meeting of it this morning. Once the I said one of the key points is governing bodies receive notification from us of what their budget is through the funding formula, and then they have until the 31st of May to develop their spending plans. So they usually receive notification either at the end of February, beginning of March, depending on when the budget is set and we've been able to run the figures through the funding formula, and then they have a couple of months to work up their spending plans in terms of how they're going to spend it. One key point that is picked up within the regulations, and it is quite different to how other areas are financed, and that is that schools are able to move forward any surpluses or deficits to future years. So one of those challenges we come to earlier around the kind of state of education in Wales and the funding challenges across Wales is this hasn't just suddenly appeared overnight. It was a trend that's been happening for many years, although we did have a change when it came to COVID, and there was a lot of money in the system which pushed up balances. So we had a lot of surpluses during COVID, and now they're running out. If we could please go to the next slide. So overall, schools spend a lot of their funding on staff. It's the biggest proportion of their budget, and across all schools, it's around 85%. So that gives very limited scope for where they can make savings. Savings are generally targeted towards their staffing levels, and then they have some other costs around premises and other grant streams that they can also explore. And then the bottom half of that slide just talks about the level of income, so it just shows grant income is about 14% of our school budgets. The rest of it is mainly through the council's budget that gets set. It is also worth noting that schools have supported efficiency savings over the last 3 financial years. So, of course, that also has an impact if schools aren't identifying those efficiencies to go with it. It otherwise creates a deficit position that they then carry forward into future years. If we could move on to the next. So where are we now? So at the closing balance of 25-26, we had a net an overall balance of £4.1 million in deficit. So we were in the negative situation in terms of our school balances at the end of the last financial year. And I'll just skip the projections and come back to them and go to the next bit, which is the variability in that closing position. So at the 31st of March, something that has been flagged up quite consistently is we do have quite a significant variance across our schools. So, for example, in primary sector, we have a difference of £1.4 million. So essentially, we go from a school in 353k surplus to a school in 1.1 million in deficit. So it's quite a significant variance to what you would generally class as similar education facilities. And that's also replicated in secondary, where there's a range of £1.38 million, a very similar difference. This is something that we believe is quite unique to our position at the moment, and something that we're really drilling into to understand why that is. So in terms of projections then to move forward, so we are projecting that at the end of 25-26, we'll end the financial year with a £13.4 million deficit. So that's increasing from the 4.1. These are all cumulative figures, as I said, because we roll forward. So £13.4 million deficit at the end of this financial year across our schools. I suppose the direction of travel over recent months, and there's the purpose of showing that previous figure of £15.3 million, we have reduced that through the work that we've been doing with schools over the last 6 months. So since the previously figures are what was reported to our Start Well Scrutiny Committee in December. So since December, we've gone from £15.3 million outturn to 13.4. That's not a final position. We will expect that to change slightly as we move towards the end of the financial year for a range of different factors, which will include obviously any final grants from Welsh Government we receive towards the end of the financial financial year. In 26-27, we're currently projecting the deficit to grow then to £27.2 million, and that's a reduction from the position in December where it was 30.3 million, and then in 27-28, 41.2 million, whereas the previous was 45.9. So positive direction of travel, but still a long way to go. We are keeping a close eye on the variability between schools as well, and what we're actually seeing at the moment, based on our projected outturn, is the variations are not coming down. We're actually expecting the variations across primary, secondary, and all through to grow slightly, based on our current outturn projections. So something that that there is a big piece of work to do over the next couple of months. 33 schools are projected to be in deficit. That's a reduction from 38, which was the position in December. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. On this slide then just shows that more detailed breakdown. I don't need to go through it in any real details. It doesn't show a huge difference from the previous slide, but it just breaks down the projections for 25-26 by primary, secondary, and all through, and you can see that variance there between deficits and surpluses. So if we could move on to the next slide. So a lot has been a lot of the kind of news and information around school deficit budgets has been around the warning notices that were issued earlier in this year. So this slide just provides a bit more of a narrative around that process. So the 25-26 budgets, of course, we had our spending plans submitted by the 31st of May last year, and recovery plans were submitted in June to support those. So those recovery plans were submitted by any of the schools that were projecting deficits. The initial focus then was on 10 schools that were causing concern, so those that had the largest deficits or largest percentage deficit of their overall budget, to really look into why that was the case. And early and informal warning notices were issued to those schools in September to ask them for more robust recovery plans and evidence, which is in line with the regulations. Those schools then returned recovery plans in October, and and 3 schools were deemed to have made sufficient progress through the submission of those plans, because they were targeted saving £5.2 million over the next 3 years to put themselves in a balanced position. However, 7 schools were considered to have not made sufficient progress at that point, and we didn't have sufficient confidence in their recovery plan. Therefore, formal warning notices were issued for those. They had until January of this year to then submit those updated recovery plans, and we've seen a significant progress from those 7 schools. So we saw an in-year improvement of 851k, which is a huge achievement considering there wasn't a significant amount of time left in the financial year to make those in-year improvements. And we're also seeing a overall £5.8 million saving cumulatively across the 3-year planning period across those 7 schools. So overall, across the work done over all those 10 schools that were causing concern, we've seen nearly £11 million in savings through the recovery setting process. As a result of that work and the fact that we had much more confidence in the schools that were causing concern, those formal notices were withdrawn, and that was done to allow us to have a more regular, constructive, positive dialogue with head teachers and governors to then monitor their recovery plans and work with them on implementing them. And now, since then, we've now issued the 3-year budget allocations. So at the beginning of this month, all schools received their 3-year budget allocations for 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29. And they're all working hard on developing their spending plans to submit them on the 31st of May. So then we can review those recovery plans and work with them on the implementation. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what are we doing in terms of supporting schools? Of course, a priority is continuing to support and monitor those recovery plans that have been submitted by those 7 schools. So we've invited them to come and meet with us after Easter, and I'm going out to meet with them one-to-one as well, given that I'm new and don't have those relationships with them. So I'm going out to meet them after Easter as well, and it will be monitoring them, supporting them to implement those recovery plans and those savings that they've identified. However, we are looking to shift the focus. So rather than just focus on 7 schools, the focus now has to be on stemming the flow and stabilizing the overall situation. And the development of the spending plans by the 31st of May will be really key to that process, because what we need to do is to stop deficits from accumulating and get schools to be, as an initial priority, in an in-year balanced position, which means that their expenditure within a year is within the funding we've given them for that particular year, and then we can start making progress on the historical deficits. So this is, early intervention. The picture's not looking positive for next year. We're looking at having a large number of our schools going into a deficit position based on projections. So this work's going to be really important to make sure we have robust, deliverable spending plans and recovery plans. To do that, we're providing support and guidance to head teachers, but we're also making sure that we empower head teachers and governors to seek that advice themselves, to work with us to shape what that advice looks like. It's always a challenge with schools of what's the role of the local authority and what's the role of governors and head teachers. So it's about that partnership approach and making sure we work with them to find and have the tools they need to make their decisions. We're putting additional resource into the team to look at to support our monitoring with schools and to provide a kind of single point of contact for recovery plans for all schools to be able to work with, which will really help us to have a strong hold on the situation. We also want schools to be working together, so we're developing case studies for schools, because of those 7 schools, we've seen some significant progress in a short space of time, and we need to share that to show other schools how they've achieved that. So we're working with them at the moment on developing those case studies and supporting partnership working within our local authority, but also outside of our local authority. Schools work on families, which means that they're linked with similar schools with similar demographics across Wales, and that shouldn't just be for school improvement purposes. That can also be looking at budget financing. We're also developing benchmarking around leadership costs, leadership sizes, additional, teaching time versus non-teaching time, all that sort of thing. And we also have a range of transformation projects that are underway as well for the council to directly support schools in making savings. And if we could go on to the final slide, please. So this just gives a summary of some of those transformation projects. So, one part of that, which I hope some of you have seen coming through in recent decisions, is around contracting and procurement. So one of those areas was switching waste services back to the council. And since April last year, that saved schools £155,000. Of course, that's not going to balance our books, but it's a really positive way forward to make sure that we're not making savings that directly affect teaching and learning. It's those quick wins. But the other benefit of that is it also brings money directly back into the council, because those schools are buying services from the council rather than buying them from private external companies. We're also at the moment taking a report through around photocopying, so looking at the council procuring a contract for 3 to 5 years on printing and photocopying, so schools can join that contract and take advantage of those savings as and when their contracts expire. And there are other areas we're looking at as well, which are more in the early days, but we're taking forward at pace over the next few months around the workforce and agency, what future of teaching and learning looks like, and utilising modern methods of teaching delivery around, hybrid e-school delivery, and also looking at how we can use digital, artificial intelligence, all those sorts of things to essentially make delivery of education more efficient and effective in schools. So I think that's the final slide, unless I've missed something. So thank you very much, Chair, and of course happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Matthew. And thank you for that presentation too. Before I open up to everybody, I just wanted to ask a few myself. Obviously, we as Resources Scrutiny Committee, are kind of like overarching scrutiny function is looking at the financial health of the authority, and we do focus quite clearly on financial matters and financial reports. What I really wanted us to be able to get from this review, although the overview was great and the background is all very interesting, I just wanted us to be able to see a little bit more detail on the actual content of some of these recovery plans, exactly what the schools are doing and how they're going about saving money. I don't think it's just because I'm nosy and we don't need the detail of who and which schools, just exactly the things they're doing, because that's 'cause that's our remit with scrutiny. I think as well, I personally would also like to know a little bit more about the savings coming out of our procurement function as well. Really good that they've come back in with waste, and that's going to save you considerable amount of money. But it will be really helpful if we could actually see a little bit more detail then on those particular savings, if that's possible. And also to understand a little bit more about the language. I know you've talked about stemming the flow to stabilise this situation. I'd like to know what that means, really. What does that mean to us? That would be helpful too. So if you can quickly come back on some of those things, that would be lovely before I open up the floor, because I can see we've got quite a few people now with their hands up who'd also like to ask you some questions. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I'm happy to answer some of those. In terms of detail, it's a difficult balance, isn't it, with terms of the information that we present. These are very live figures that we're working through at the moment. The position changes very, very regularly, and we're also very conscious of the pressure that schools are under around these as well, and some of the very difficult decisions that lay ahead of them. So, we don't want to start spooking people by putting too much information about individual schools in the public domain either. So it's a very difficult balance, but it's something that we're happy to work with you on the right forum and the right platform for us to have some of these discussions in the real depth of the work that's going on in schools. In terms of the stemming the flow language, stemming the flow is essentially the focus on stopping the in-year deficit position. So as I said, education is quite unique in the rolling forward of deficits and surpluses. What we're really focusing on at the moment is those in-year deficit positions to make sure that we are not building up our deficit anymore by continuing to allow in-year deficits to roll over year and year, which will just make that overall position grow wider and wider. So the absolute position is to get schools in a stable position where their expenditure meets their income essentially on an annual basis, and then we can also look at how we then integrate and work with getting rid of those historical deficits and bringing down that position. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about stemming the flow. Happy to discuss how we can create the right forums, have some of those details discussions around the procurement savings and around what schools are putting forward. Of course, the procurement savings are really good, and it's really great that we're able to provide those, and there's a lot more work to do to widen that. But as that early slide in my presentation showed, a significant portion of the school's budget is on staffing. So a large amount of the savings within their recovery plans will be based on reducing that staffing level to align with the curriculum they're delivering and the number of learners that they have now and in the future. So that will be through looking at, of course, not replacing vacant posts when they become vacant, but also looking at voluntary redundancies, and in some cases they may need to look at compulsory redundancies. I hope I've answered those questions.
You have, thank you, and that is that's quite concerning. But I do understand that we have a projected reduction in pupils, so that's also something that we've got to bear in mind, isn't it? Can I now ask Councillor Campbell to please come in? I can see you've got your hand up first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matthew. I did originally want to raise the same point as Councillor Prothero in regards to procurement. It was something that I initially did look out for in the presentation, but it was only mentioned once in there. Obviously, it's quite a big piece of work that was undertaken by the council, and it was a shame that it wasn't mentioned more to give us a little bit more to kind of scrutinise and go back on as to kind of bookend that bit of work. But as you already explained that, Matthew, I won't go into that further. The one question I wanted to raise is you talked about families of schools. Has there been any analysis in regards to the cluster schools and whether they are following a trend in regards to deficit and surpluses? Are we looking at kind of the geographical, and how they are falling in regards to spending? that's pretty much my question.
Yeah, Chair, are you happy for me to respond directly?
Absolutely, Matthew. It's
Brilliant.
yeah. I'll just keep myself in the background when you're answering their questions. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. Noted the comments around procurement. Of course, I'll give myself a little bit of leeway as I'm only 2 weeks into the role, so I haven't been fully embedded in some of the conversations and some of the work streams that have gone on around procurement, because a lot of those have already had results. And a lot of that is in the public domain as well, in terms of we've been taking regular reports to Cabinet on some of the outcomes of that work, but happy to share some information with committee around some of the detail of how that procurement savings are following through and what's left to come through that as well. And then in terms of clusters, the schools work really, really well in clusters. I've got to be honest, it's a real strength here in the Vale. They work very closely together in clusters. The warning notices were issued to schools across the Vale of Pwyllgor. They weren't isolated to a single cluster. But of course, that is part of the discussions we're having with individual schools and with clusters around some of the rationale behind it. But we are, as I mentioned in my presentation, also asking them to look wider, because even within clusters, there may be some similarities in terms of demographics, but we still have very large variances in terms of schools and need within our individual clusters as well. You know, one of our clusters is the entire rural Vale, which, you know, has very changing demographics around it. So that's why we're looking to also work through some of those established partnerships like families.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. Councillor Ewan Goodjohn, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy for Matthew or Liz or anyone else to take up my questions. I've got quite a few, so it might be worth taking them one at a time, and they're quite short, forgive me. So firstly, I wanted to ask about the deficit projections to future. Has that taken into account the budget that was passed earlier this month and the additional 2 million that's going into schools for next year for the specific cost pressure?
Yes, the budget projections include that 2 million.
Great, thanks. I wanted to ask, because we hear a lot about the variance between schools. So the 7 schools that we were most concerned about that had those notices, how many of them are primary and how many of them are secondary, if I may ask?
I'm trying to work it through in my head now very quickly. I believe, Liz, you've probably got this off the top of your head.
6 are primary, 1 secondary.
1 secondary was left, yeah.
What would be really interesting to get is, we discuss a lot about that variance being really important, is how much of the deficit that we're seeing at the moment is coming from those 7 schools as a block, and how much of that is coming from every other school as a block, to really understand how is the overall pressure on all of the schools. I don't know if anyone has figures to hand on that, or if we can get that in later on. That would be really interesting to know.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to work that out immediately on the call,
Yeah.
just in case I made it incorrect. But I suppose one thing I would say in terms of the projections, of course, the projections are based on those 7 schools implementing their recovery plans.
Yeah.
So actually, they're some of the more positive schools on our spreadsheet in terms of future balances, because they're moving towards a balanced position.
Yeah, in terms of future, I mean more
Yeah.
as to right now, where that would be more prevalent. But yes, no, that's a fair comment. I think it's also important to note that we are not at the end of the year. There's also the potential for additional Welsh Government grant money, which usually comes at the end of the year. So we don't know the full picture, of course, and hopefully there is more savings to be made in year as well over time. I'm just trying to understand better the overall financial picture in a detailed way as to where are all of our schools at the moment, where are they heading, and where are the schools who are currently in the worst position overall, where are they now, and where are they heading? But that all helps. The last thing I wanted to ask about is the ALN spend. Do we know about, because my understanding is this is figures based on ALN per all pupils, Do we know where our spend is on ALN per ALN pupil? I know that ALN is a very broad range of a very broad range of pupils could be designated as ALN, and they have very different needs. But I'd be interested as to where we are per ALN pupil.
Yeah, great. I don't, again, have that figure to hand. The numbers that we're using for ALN spend per pupil are Welsh Government published figures that are verified each year based on a return that we have. So it does pull together all the spend on ALN, not just kind of delegated. It also includes our staff within the local authority providing support for learners with needs. It's a very all-encompassing figure. What we can do, of course, is look at how much funding per pupil is going through the non-mainstream funding formula, which would show us our spend per ALN pupil.
If I can just sneakily ask one last thing, I know that some schools put on transport outside of what we procure as an authority. Has there been any look at the ways we can rationalise that as part of the school transport review in order to basically save the schools from having to spend on it and duplicating work?
I'm not aware of schools providing transport. Is that to pupils eligible for free transport, or are they topping up, or are they allocating transport for kids that aren't eligible for free school transport?
I'm aware of situations of both. Again, I don't want to specify here in a public forum, but I'm aware of both situations occurring.
Happy if you want to pick that up with me outside of the meeting.
That's great. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor John. Thank you, Matthew. It is, I mean, this is an interesting. I suppose this is how budgets work, but that we still would be paying for home to school transport for our ALN students out of the ALN budget. That is the case, isn't it? If you can just confirm.
Yeah, that the figure that I provided that was in the ALN spend per pupil includes transport spend on learners with additional learning needs.
Yes, and it comes out of the ALN budget, not because I suppose if a child's actually eligible for home to school transport, whether it's because of where they live geographically or because of their special needs, it's still home to school transport. I mean, I'm just trying to understand why
as far as I'm aware, we
40%
don't.
of the budget where it should be spent on the support for the children learning, it's on transport. That's all. It's
Yeah, I suppose just say we don't, as far as I'm aware, we don't allocate a budget for ALN transport and a budget for non-ALN transport. It's just a transport budget for schools. But when we're reporting figures back to Welsh Government for them to do the correlation of the figures and provide those breakdowns of how we spend our pupils, we itemise it there.
got you. Thank you.
So it's an outturn rather than a projection.
I'm with you. Councillor Emma Goodjohn now, your turn, please.
Thanks, Chair. And hi, Matthew. My question is regarding digital and AI support for schools. I know that we've been supporting digitally. Is it Arbor? We've helped them with to try and save money. And I'm just wondering if we were supporting them with AI on those platforms so that they have the adequate support they need to try and reduce the work that staff are doing, maybe on so much admin, and this could help them. Are we providing that support? Are we providing adequate AI support on these platforms that we're helping with them, please?
I'm absolutely sure there's more we can do, and I think that will come out of some of the discussions that we have with head teachers and governing bodies over the next couple of months around what that support looks like. Although what I would say is we have some excellent practitioners out there in schools that are already doing incredible things with AI, and it's about taking that learning from some of the head teachers that are doing it really, really well and how we share that across all of our schools, and again looking outside our authority, because quite often with these things some of the schools already have the answer and are doing really great things, and we just need to make sure that we're sharing that and making sure all schools can benefit from it. But absolutely, I'm sure that there's more that schools will want us to do around that as well.
That's wonderful, Matthew. Yeah, because I'm concerned that I don't want them to have to be spending money on additional platforms to reinforce the AI capable ability they need to help them reduce the staffing costs. So that I'd be really appreciate if that could be looked at. Thank you.
Chair, would it be okay if I added something to that particular question?
Absolutely, please do.
We already have good practice identified in terms of the use of AI, where we've had a school showcase what it's doing, and again looking in particular to decrease teacher workload, but not just that, actually make things better for all, children included. So again, if you would be interested, I could pass on information about where that's working really, really well. And again, like Matthew said, we have enormous expertise already in our schools. So again, if you'd be interested, I could point you in that direction. Thank you.
That would be great. Thank you, Liz. I would appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor John, and thank you, Liz. And I think going back to where we started, as a committee, a scrutiny committee, we really want to have a little bit more information on the detail because, as you've already pointed out, there are some schools who are doing really well. We knew that anyway. We're managing their budget. Some that need some more support. Some really good practice going on that's going to be shared, and we would also like to see some of that. And that's why we've asked if we can have further reviews, and especially on some of these special transformational projects that you're working on. We just want to know more about how they're going and the detail and the savings and the case studies that you're going to be sharing across your partnerships. We'd like to see them too here. Anyway, we've got Councillor Carroll now who wants to ask some questions, so I'll bring him in. Thank you, Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for the presentation. My questions are going to focus on three separate points that were made within the presentation. The first was that the Vale of Glamorgan as a local authority, in terms of its education funding, receives the fourth lowest by indicator-based assessment in Wales. Then there's the point that was made that the Vale of Glamorgan has the second highest ALN spend requirement of any local authority in Wales. And then there's the third point that was made, was that schools do have a limited scope to make savings. And then we've obviously heard talk of redundancies, etc., as a potential means of making that a reality. So is the question not whether the authority is properly funded vis-a-vis education? I note the point that was made about the indicators that are used, i.e. sparse population and deprivation. Now, while I accept that there are other areas in Wales with higher levels of deprivation than the Vale of Glamorgan, there are some really deprived communities that need funding and assistance to help them in that situation. And so my question is, because my view is that the funding formula isn't fit for purpose, it needs a radical overhaul. Would the authority agree with that assessment? And if so, what action is it taking to make that happen?
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. All very good points there. Matthew, do you want to come in? But maybe also Matt Baumer might want to just bring some clarity to the funding formula because he has to work with this every year. I understand that. But Matthew, over to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on some of the things that I can. In terms of the the point that was made around the school's limited scope to make savings, we accept that. However, we also have to acknowledge that we do have a declining pupil roll, so we cannot continue to maintain the staffing levels that we have within our schools whilst our pupil numbers are reducing, because so much of our funding is based on pupil numbers. So as they continue to reduce in areas and the birth rate continues to drop, the inevitable situation is schools have to amend and adjust their staffing ratios to deal with that. And we also And as I mentioned earlier, redundancies is always the last resort. Schools will always look to not fill vacant positions and will look to do voluntary redundancies before they go down any other route. I think that's really important. We do work very closely with Welsh Government. They, of course, work with us around this, and we do make them very much aware of the challenges that we're having in terms of school budgets and school funding. But the formula is the formula. Any change to that formula would take, at least a year or two to come into effect. So we have a very real situation here where we need to work within the budgets that we're delivering to schools. And our priority is, of course, working with those schools to deliver those budgets and deliver those spending plans within their means, so that we're not putting the council in an unstable position of deficits continuing to rise year on year.
Thank you.
Could I come
Thank
back
you, Matt.
in,
Yeah,
please,
of course you
Chair?
can. I was going to
Yes,
ask you, do
thanks.
you want to hear from Matt Baumer first, or do you want to ask a follow-up question?
I'll wait for Matt, although it may very well be that I then redirect to forgive me, I've forgotten the name of the person I was just speaking to.
That's Matt. He's our new.
That is
Yeah.
why I'm confused, because
There's
it's two
two.
Matts.
Sorry.
Apologies for that.
We'll have Matt 1 and Matt 2. This is Matt
Matt
1.
Curtis,
He's been here
yes,
longer.
sorry.
Yeah.
I think Matt's broadly covered Councillor Carroll's question, but just to add that we do continually lobby. I certainly push through WLJ and Society of Welsh Treasure routes, and I know the leader does similar in her role. I think one of the challenges we have is understanding how best to challenge on the formula, because we don't want any unintended consequences about any reallocations. We do have some concerns about certain elements of the formula, nevertheless. I think a couple of important points to note are there is a limited pot of money, and any changes will give winners and losers, and I'm sure there'll be some resistance to that. So it's important we lobby, but we just need to manage our expectations on any positive outcomes around that.
Thank you, Matt. And I think it's also a good point to make here that this committee actually also wrote. So we're all trying to get more money, because obviously it's something that would help. Councillor Carroll, please come back in if you've got another question on that one.
Thank you, Joe. It's just a follow-up with Matt Curtis, and apologies, Matt, for the confusion there. Too many Matts, I think, confused me somewhat. So it's just in relation to the point you made about declining roll numbers. Are you saying then that you consider some of the Vale schools to be currently overstaffed? Or is that a problem you foresee happening in future?
The answer is I don't know, because I'm not responsible for developing individual school budgets. That's a decision for governing bodies and for head teachers. What I would say is that our funding formula is a 3-year spending plan. So we're asking them to look at a 3-year spending plan, and what we do know is over 3 years, the role is reducing. So if whatever their staffing is right now today will need to be amended to reflect what it will look like in 3 years' time, which will, across most of our schools, be smaller numbers of cohorts.
But is that not going to present a challenge then? Because if you're asking schools to face a decline in their budget now, when they do need those staff, they're going to struggle to reconcile that.
So their spending plans are 3-year, based on 3-year individual budgets. So we're not saying you've got to amend your staffing ratio today if you need that staffing ratio to fulfill it, but you need to plan it for next year. So that could be factored in your spending plan for next year and then the year after. So what we're looking at them to do is to look holistically across the 3 years and do their plans accordingly. And part of that will be considering whether they currently have more staff than they need to deliver the education and curriculum that's required for their size school.
Is there much leeway on that? The reason I ask is because numbers can vary from year to year. If you're looking to retain staff and obviously build staff morale, if you're making redundancies on the basis of a short period of time, and then you may need to go out and re-recruit and then make further redundancies, obviously there must be some form of leeway there within the budgets, because otherwise you're not going to have continuity.
So the budgets are based on the projected numbers of pupils. So the school should look at those projected number of pupils and consider them. The change in role is not a short-term recent thing. That reduction in the number on roll has been happening and continued over the last 10 years. So schools do have to adjust to that. As I mentioned earlier in the conversation, one part of school funding that has distorted the position slightly is that in the next 2 years, during the COVID years, there was additional funding within the system, which rolled over for multiple years, which of course allowed there to be more funding available. As I said, what I'm not saying is there will be redundancies every single year to maintain the position with number on roll. What schools should be looking at is what staff they're looking to lose through vacant positions over the next 3 years, and having those discussions internally to avoid redundancies wherever they can.
And when you talk about declining roles, is that the role in the Vale of Glamorgan or the role overall? The reason I ask this question is because I'm aware of many people who haven't been able to get their children into the school within their village or within their community because that school for the respective child's year group is full. And then you find that a significant proportion of the pupils within that year group in that school are either coming from elsewhere in the Vale or in some cases from out of county. Now, I accept that you need to take out of county pupils in some instances to make the school viable and to keep it running. I'm not disputing that. It's just a question really regarding the roll numbers, i.e., again, it's very difficult to balance this. But if you're bringing in pupils from elsewhere to keep the school viable, is it the pupils from elsewhere you're looking at on the roll number, as in the total number, or is it just Vale pupil numbers you're looking at?
So the projected number on roll will include whoever is currently on roll plus a birth rate assumption. So it will be based on parental preference as well. So that will include movement across the boundary.
So that would take the projections would take into account out of county pupils as well.
Yes, and we would expect schools to consider that because they should be considering how many learners every year they're going to have to teach when they're developing their spending plans, not just who lives in their area, because that would be a very difficult thing to plan for them not to then turn up, or the other way around, or have 30 kids more than what you would expect to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. Thank you, Matt. Clearly, there's just not enough babies being born, and that's part of the problem here, isn't it? But there we go. Right, do we have anybody else then who'd like to ask a question on this report? No? Okay, that's great. Well, thank you both, Liz and Matt, for coming and for fielding all of our questions. I think we've all agreed as a committee that we want more. We want to hear more from you, if that's okay. And I think then if we can recommend then that that we see you again, if that's not too hard to ask you to do that, in another 6 months' time, because we'd like more detail on your procurement savings, and we'd like more detail on the actions that the schools that have been improving have actually put in place. We don't need to know which schools, I understand that, but we just want some more detail, and we want to know what the actions are so that we can actually see then what savings are attributed to these actions, and then just understand a little bit more about how that's working. That would be great. So if everybody's happy with that recommendation, we shall ask for a hand to move. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And again, thanks ever so much for both of you for coming in today. If we then move on to our next agenda item then, which is our task and finish review. I was a member of this group, and I can say that it was enlightening. The group was tasked with countering misinformation and examining how the Vale of Glamorgan Council can better understand and respond to false or misleading narratives that are there, and they can deceive, frighten and divide our residents and erode public trust. This task and finish group has sat over the last 6 months, made up of members from this committee. We heard from many expert witnesses, and they shared their invaluable knowledge and experiences with us. And that's helped us come forward with recommendations, which are contained within this report. To all of those expert witnesses, we give our thanks, and not just for the time they gave to us in this task and finish group, but for the work that they all do, which was inspirational to all of us. So I'm going to hand over now to the chair of our task and finish group, Councillor Bell Lovelock Edwards, and also our vice chair, Emma Goodjohn, because they're going to take us through this excellent report. So over to you then, Councillor Lovelock Edwards. Thank you.
A hand up. You just need to request to speak, I think, Councillor.
Oh, sorry, Chair. I had problems with my laptop, but it was actually me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you and see you. Right, I'm going now and let you take over. Thank you ever so much.
But thank you, Chair, for that introduction. I mean, it superbly sort of sums up the premise for the task and finish group. But we've all previously been subject to the odd misquote or statement being taken out of context. But what we are witnessing and reading online is becoming far more sinister. Not always, but increasingly, mis and disinformation is proving to damage us as a local authority, but sadly damages our communities too. So the basis, therefore, for considering this issue as a task and finish group was to allow us across all parties to learn about how misinformation is creating division and understand how disinformation is a barrier to the authority and in our abilities as elected members to be the voice for local residents. So we know that disinformation is the deliberate creation and spreading of false or manipulated content. And we also know too that misinformation is the unintentional creation and spreading of such information. And although disinformation is a very old concept, it now more than ever has the potential to spread faster and further through social media and online communication, and such as WhatsApp and Facebook. And so these were the areas that we wanted to explore. So the report shows the individuals and groups that were invited to participate to share their experiences and to help us understand how we can adapt to the onslaught of disinformation and misinformation. And most strikingly, we were all horrified at the Welsh Refugee Council staff telling us of the shock and impact in real life of how disinformation gave rise to death threats and damage to their offices. So you will see that all members believe, from the report, will believe widely and deeply that addressing this issue allows us to better support each other and help us understand too what our role is and our duty to our residents. But we also wanted to ensure that we could support officers across the council, but critically to build community resilience and improve our communication strategies so that those residents who are more vulnerable to this issue learn to sort fact from fiction. And I know that my colleague, Councillor Emma Goodjohn, will share some of her experiences. But I just wanted fellow members to consider that the recommendations that we have put down will allow us to be more proactive, to provide possible training and stronger partnerships with our comms team and other officers across the authority. And importantly, to use this initial task and finish group as the foundation for tackling all the negative, and sadly there only tends to be negative consequences of disinformation. And so I'm hoping that colleagues will have had an opportunity to read the report and look at the recommendations And I'll leave it there, Chair, and I'd like to bring in Councillor Emma Goodjohn and any other sort of member who participated in the Task and Finish group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Belle. Emma, would you like to add your experiences from the Task and Finish as well?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Belle. It was just so well put there. I think we learned an awful lot in this Task and Finish group. It was, it made us value critical thinking and gave us a lot of information. So we had 3 training sessions and 3 guest speakers who were expert witnesses. Our first training session was with the Welsh Local Government Association and Northern Irish Local Government Association, and that was managing misinformation for councillors. We learnt it was such a massive amount of information, but resonant points were pre-bunking versus debunking misinformation, and learning about information threats and harms and how that affects our communities. It separates us rather than working to solve problems in a positive fashion. We also had a second training session was with the Local Government Association, and third training session was with the Welsh Local Government Association. This was to do with disinformation, misinformation, threats, and responses, to help us learn how to manage these threats and manage mistakes, genuine mistakes. People pick up on misinformation, and it can be spread through just not understanding or through picking things up it's a massive subject. So we had some expert witnesses. We had the Welsh Government Strategic Communications, and we had Citizens Cymru Real Living Wage campaign, and also the Welsh Refugee Council that my fellow councillor just spoke of. So I hope people have managed to read the report, as it is a big report and very important at this time, I believe, because although it's as Belinda said, it is misinformation has been around a long time, but now we have social media platforms and WhatsApp groups. It can spread at an alarming rate, and trying to control that when people are getting the wrong information, when we're trying to do good work, it's very frustrating and very difficult as elected members, being the go-between the council and our residents, to be able to get the correct message to them when the information is spreading so quickly. I hope that helps a little bit, give some idea of what we were doing, and I hope some other members that were on the Task and Finish group can come in and give their experiences too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Yes, we really want to hear from everybody. So, Councillor Norman, you are a member. Please give your experiences from the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just backing up what Councillor Goodjohn said, really, I think for me, first, the biggest thing was the scaremongering that was coming to light from different places to influence the way people thought negatively against others. But I think one of the most helpful thing I had was a meeting we had with the Welsh Refugee Council, which gave us correct information so we could argue with people, but not argue so much as give people the right information about, mainly about refugees coming into this country. And 3 times within a week after that meeting, I was able to point out to people that they had the wrong information, which I couldn't have done before that session because I wasn't aware of it myself. And I think if anybody's got a chance to to listen to that recording. It really is worthwhile. And the information I got from there, I actually passed on to our local church who were dealing with something like this, and they photocopied the poster that was sent through from the council and distributed amongst their parishioners. So hopefully this will spread it far and wide. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. And I think within the report, there's quite a few appendices at the back with background information that is really, really good reading for all members, just to give us some, I suppose, information on what we can do and how do we go about tackling this, and putting the record straight, if that's the right terminology. Councillor Johnson, please come in too. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much. This was a very interesting piece of work, especially for me to hear the experiences of other councillors in terms of discussing how some rumours can spread across communities which may not be 100% correct, and also listening to other organisations in terms of how they are addressing these issues. Clearly, these recommendations provide a level of baseline that can be built upon over coming years. This is continuously changing, but again, this is historic in terms of some people having an agenda which involves being untruthful or misinterpreting intentionally, and where people don't have a full 100% understanding of the details and what's going on. So these recommendations provide a basis point for us as a council to consider how we as councillors can respond to rumours online or in the community in terms of things which are really going on. And there is a difference, as I said numerous times in the meetings, between political disagreement, where we disagree, and then intentionally misinterpreting or misunderstanding. It's important that we separate these two issues. There's room for us to robustly challenge and have different political viewpoints, but it's entirely incorrect to attempt to share or spread messages which are not true. And for us to have a proper political debate, everybody needs to be on the same page and in agreement in terms of the true facts for us to be able to proceed and have discussion. So I'm happy with the work which we did involving Liz Whittaker as member of staff supporting us as a group, and also Councillor Lovelock Edwards and Councillor Emma Goodjohn, who have led on the work. And I'm looking forward to the next phase of this work in terms of how we develop packages or training for councillors to be able to deal with things as and when they arise in our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And you made a very good point there. There is a big difference between holding a legitimate political position and illegitimate exploitation of controversy. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about us having debating and having different points of view. This is where it's illegitimate exploitation of controversy for all of the wrong reasons. Councillor Goodjohn, you're also waiting to speak, so please come in.
Thank you, Chair. And can I thank every member of the Task and Finish for this very robust piece of work, and also to the officers and everyone else that gave their time to contribute to a solid set of recommendations that we can forward on to Cabinet. When reading through this report, there was one thing that struck me that was missing, however, is that considering how severe the threat of misinformation and disinformation is to the work of public authorities across the country, and the fact that we are clearly not immune to those threats, and the fact that public authorities as a whole are so far behind in countering these threats to public trust as a whole. I wonder whether this should be reflected within our risk register as to find the correct ways to mitigate for this. By ensuring that our residents get as correct information as possible, and stuff such as that pre-banking is extremely important work, and anything that we can do to look from a risk point of view to mitigate the impact of misinformation and disinformation would be really positive. So I would ask that, in addition to all of the recommendations in the Task and Finish, that we ask Cabinet to review whether this should be reflected within the corporate risk register. And I hope people would support that as an additional way to ensure that as a local authority, we are doing everything that we possibly can to ensure that this doesn't have an impact on the way that we are able to provide services for all of the residents of the Vale.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and I would definitely second that recommendation. Councillor Emma Goodjohn, are you also seconding that recommendation, or would you like to come in?
Yes, I'd like to second that recommendation too, and I'd like to thank our democratic officer
Yes.
for Liz for helping us so much with this. It's been absolutely fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Yes, Liz has done a wonderful piece of work with us on this, and she does rightly deserve our thanks for that. Thank you. Councillor Carroll, please come in.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. In terms of the overall principle, when it comes to public debate and politics, I entirely agree that information that's shared and put out into the public domain should be accurate, facts should be checked, and accuracy is important. And I would entirely agree with the sentiments that have been raised. I think that many bodies often unwittingly do share inaccurate information that causes confusion and there can be many problems that arise as a result of that. But I am nonetheless concerned about the concept of misinformation and the way it is used in practice in political debate. Now, I note the distinction that you yourself, Chair, have made and other members of the committee have sought to draw regarding the difference between legitimate and robust debate and misinformation. But in practice, I've seen too many examples of misinformation being abused or weaponized as a tool to shut down debate that is either considered undesirable or unhelpful. And I see it in public discourse all the time. Legitimate matters of debate and opinion are often dismissed or discredited by being called misinformation. And I'm concerned with the recommendations within this report that it could give rise to that happening if the system isn't tightly brought forward. And I look at some of the suggestions which do give rise to concern, one of which partner with like-minded organisations, the talk of third sector organisations, charity, NGOs, etc. I look at one of the organisations in particular that was called in as an expert witness, to which other members have referred, the Welsh Refugee Council. Now, they're described in the report as a crucial source of information for the project. What concerns me is this is a controversial organisation. It's highly political. It campaigns, even though it's ostensibly a charity, on political issues. I took a look at its website before coming into the meeting this evening. It says what we do seeks to influence policy, challenge, quote, harmful rhetoric, call out, quote, hostile practices. It's got a specific policy calling for a ban on people seeking asylum from working to be lifted. Now, these are controversial, at times politically charged issues, and there are too many examples in the third sector, for one, but in public debate more generally, of organisations that don't like opposing points of view or scrutiny of their own political or other policy-based work being made, then seeking to shut down or limit debate. And I fear with this that the authority, if it adopts these recommendations, is potentially going to find itself in that position. If you are suddenly partnering with certain organisations to counter misinformation, particularly if you end up partnering with organisations that have a, let's say, patchy record when it comes to their own political activities. And it's a second point I would like to note. When you say partner with local media, do we have any idea which media we're talking about? Because again, not all media outlets are politically impartial. Many of them have their own political stance. I mean, is the authority seeking to partner with the Penarth Daily News website, for example? I would imagine not. But again, given the views that I've heard other members express of that towards that site in the past. But the reason I ask this is because I'm not convinced from reading this report and the recommendations that this won't end up being adopted and then abused as a way of limiting debate. And for that reason, I'm not prepared to support this this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. And as ever, you are entitled to your views. Councillor Fisher, please come in.
Hello there. Yes, I want to sort of support some of the comments that Councillor Carroll has made. I made some other, which I'll come back to in a moment. I made some notes earlier on, so I'm just going to speak through those notes, if that's right. So it might sound a little bit stilted. I think, you know, the report does address a genuine issue, that misinformation does have an impact on communities, on trust with local authorities, and increasingly, I would say, on councillors and staff, particularly online. I think the report rightly recognises that members are often on the front line of this. We are, of course, the ones that people turn to, and we do need to have better access to clear information and practical guidance on how to respond. There are some sensible proposals in the report, particularly, I would say, around training, improving communication between members and officers, and offering better support to those who find themselves targeted. But I do have a few concerns. With regard to the evidence, the research, the evidence base was quite limited. The report is the result of a number of training sessions, small number of external voices, although I do understand that the committee was limited in terms of budget and time. So I think it's a good piece of work. I don't want to understate it. I think it's a good piece of work. But I feel as though there is more work to be done, if I can put it that way. I think it's important that we're very careful on how we define misinformation, because not every criticism of the council or its members is, of course, misinformation. And if we're not careful, there is the risk of blurring that line, which could potentially ultimately lead to undermining trust, I suppose, than building it. Echoing to a certain extent what Councillor Carroll said, I think in terms of partnerships, I understand the intention, and in many ways, I think it's important that we do need to work with partner organisations. But again, I think we do need to proceed with caution, because we do need to remain politically neutral. And although organisations such as the Welsh Refugee Council are legitimate and established, a charity doing very important work, they also engage in advocacy. And in an area, I suppose, that is politically sensitive and quite polarised. So if we do work with partners such as that, we need to do so in a clearly defined, limited way, focusing on specific outcomes, because we don't want to be seen to be aligning ourselves with everything that these partner organisations say. Echoing what Councillor Carroll has said in terms of free speech, broader subject of free speech, we don't want to be seen in any way restricting free speech. Free speech is something that is obviously very fundamental to our democracy, very important, and we need to guard that safely. So anything that restricts freedom of speech is something that is to be treated as with significant caution. Though I do appreciate that's not what we're really talking about in this report. And one last point, in terms of, and this I don't think was mentioned in the report, and in terms of language that is used by ourselves as a council, and indeed other organisations, we have to be very careful, because even sort of minor changes in language can change the nuance of argument. I mean, just take the two sort of expressions. He fathered the child and she mothered the child. They mean very, very different things. And not everything that is liberal is necessarily progressive, or not everything that is on the right is bad or good, and not everything that's on the left is on good or bad. So we need to be careful with the language that we use. I think overall, I think the report is broadly right and it's heading in the right direction, but I just wanted to have those comments, those concerns noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. And as a member of the TNF group, I'm surprised if you haven't already fed back that, because we were all given an opportunity to. Before I bring Liz back in, our democratic officer who managed the work and also has used accurate definitions of these words when we talk about misinformation and disinformation, I'll bring in Councillor Goodjohn, because he's got his hand up next. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's important that we take a balanced approach to this. The first and most important thing about task and finishes is that they are balanced and neutral among all of the councillors that are involved. And I hope that when a task and finish document is produced, that as far as possible, all members of the task and finish are able to put their names to it before it is published. And I hope that everyone works towards that. That is the entire point of the task and finish scrutiny changes. With the Welsh Refugee Council, I completely understand the concerns of bias politically from the Welsh Refugee Council. I was not on the task and finish group, but I think it is a fair thing to say that they have a large amount of experience when it comes to misinformation, disinformation online, because of the circumstances of what's occurred in the last 2 years to the organisation. And so I don't think that task and finishes should be restricted on who they speak to. However, there must be acknowledgement from all members of the task and finish group that who they are speaking to may be biased, and to take that on board when they're considering their final recommendations, which I would assume is what's happened here, and other members can speak more to it. My point of view is just how can we change the wording in future in order to ensure that everyone is satisfied with recommendations before they come before the committee as a whole. So, for example, recommendations 8 and 11 were mentioned by Councillors Fisher and Carroll. And I think this entirely comes down to the interpretation of what you call a like-minded organisation, because that will depend on, well, partly who's in administration, but also how you view local government as a whole. And I'd be interested if there were any thoughts by those councillors in ways that we can, without necessarily having to change the recommendations, put limitations on so that they were satisfied that these could not be abused in any way. And if they have any thoughts on how we could do that, that would be really helpful in future. And then I'll yield to everyone else who's waiting to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Councillor Lovelock-Edwards, do you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to everyone who's made a contribution. I'd just like to remind all colleagues that at the outset, we were all given the democratic right to discuss what task and finish group item or issue or concern or subject matter we wanted to participate, and this was deemed to be the overwhelming key one. So if anyone has any alternatives for future task and finish groups, I would welcome their contribution. It's important to note that I will say, except Councillor Carroll's point around sort of, some issues are politically charged. What we all acknowledged, hence the reason why there were the participants, is because we are living through an increasing amount of mis and disinformation. And I'm glad that we were able to sort of, separate the two. They are quite distinct and, and equally damaging. And I think it's important to understand that the recommendations are not pinning us down to any one particular group or any one particular media profile, although in terms of media, I would hope that they are professional journalists, because we wouldn't want to encourage journalists being done out of a job. I just feel that there is an instance where one group that participated, and there were, 3 or 4 others, have been sort of spotlighted because they are a legitimate organisation. They have been at the forefront of working with other organisations around mis and disinformation. So they were the experts then to give expert evidence as witnesses to what they, as an organisation and as a group of staff, have lived through this past year or so. And that hearing those voices is key. And so as Councillor Fisher, who was a member of the Task and Finish group, has alluded to, although this is the first time I'm hearing this as chair, that we need to be sort of not pinned down in terms of the groups that we choose. And so it's a question of understanding that the whole premise for the Task and Finish group was to hear from the people and the organisations that have that knowledge and expertise that we can learn from. And training and cooperation and building resilience as an authority, as well as building resilience of our own community, is vital. And as I've said at the outset, this Task and Finish group is just laying the foundation, hopefully, for future Task and Finish groups that could well be linked to this subject matter, because it's not going to go away. It is hurting us all as a society, and as elected members, we've an obligation to address the sinister aspects of mis and disinformation, which damages us all, and we all pay the price, and we shouldn't have to. I Chair, want to just finish as well and echo, and I'm terribly sorry, Liz, I should have done it at the outset, and that is to give you my sincere thanks for your support in what you have done, and your work and your quiet and stoic patience in sort of helping me as chair of the Task and Finish group. And I, sincere thanks to you. And I'll stop there, Chair. Sorry, I've taken far too much time on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Ludwig-Edwards. Councillor Emma Goodjohn, do you want to come back in?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to I'd like to echo what Belle has just said, our chair of our Task and Finish. I'm a little bit shocked, really, because Councillor Fisher was on the Task and Finish group, and he didn't give a lot of input, to be honest. And I'm glad he's finally come forward and put his input in. But if it had been put forward at an earlier stage, or if he could have picked an expert witness, he could have picked a training session, but we didn't get any feedback from him. But we are not here. This was done to work positively. It's not done politically charged. It is done to help the council, to help us as members, to learn more about misinformation. So it was done in a positive aspect, to help a positive way forward, and not how I feel it is being portrayed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. I did say I'd bring Liz back in, if that's okay, because I know that she, being the author of this report, she had correct definitions for us of disinformation and misinformation. And I think it's helpful really just to share that with everybody, because these aren't opinions of these words, these are definitions of these words. So it just helps us to understand. Thank you.
That's right, and I think that the definitions were taken from the training, and I think terminology can be quite difficult, especially when there's sort of a lot of views around the issue. But I think one of the things that was pointed out was about the sort of choice of expert witnesses, and it's great to hear the feedback, and I think that you are limited sometimes within timescales on availability of expert witnesses, but I think the quality of the people that spoke to us was very high. And I think the wording in the report where it refers to the Welsh Refugee Council as being crucial, what that means from my perspective in writing that is that they were crucial in terms of getting a balance and some form of triangulation to our research within the time frame available, because they could represent not only an organisation that had been the victim of a misinformation attack, but also because they represented a section of the community that's often victimised by this kind of attack or misinformation threats. So it's great to hear people's feedback. I'm really glad that this has generated some debate tonight, and it'll all be taken on board. But I think it was a strong piece of work, and the recommendations, are there for members to discuss. And I think that's good that we have here. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Liz. Okay, so do we have any other members who want to come in on the report at all? No? Okay. So the purpose of the recommendations here, do you want me to read through them? Because we haven't actually, obviously they're in the report, and these were recommendations for Cabinet to consider. That's what we have, as a TNF group, we agreed on. And they are as follows. So we wanted to schedule bespoke Vale-specific training sessions for elected members to help them identify and respond to misinformation. We wanted to see a toolkit created for elected members on that topic of countering misinformation. We wanted to strengthen and promote opportunities for improved dialogue between elected members and officers for the sharing of related information and advice. We wanted to see an established internal support system for officials who are also targeted by mis and disinformation. We then looked at the engagement of the community, and we wanted to explore offering media literacy workshops for residents to help them to better identify where they see false information and information threats and harms. And we wanted to consider developing information community champion advocates. If we take this conversation offline, we also wanted to explore the potential and possibilities for holding in-person events involving officers, elected members, partner organisations, community leaders and the public to promote social cohesion and understanding among a variety of groups of residents. Collaborating and sharing, we wanted to partner with like-minded organisations, people like Welsh Government, schools, public and third sector organisations, and also local media outlets to counter information threats. We wanted to join relevant networks, for examples, with there are good practices and resources, explore adopting shared monitoring tools with partners to enhance awareness and understanding of pervasive and emerging media narratives. We wanted to consider partnering with independent local media and influential community leaders through joint working opportunities. Advocate for support. We wanted to explore the possibilities for a variety of funding opportunities to support both resilience building internally and public facing projects to counter misinformation. We wanted to seek legal clarity from local authorities' role in combating intentional disinformation. And we wanted to see that the Resources Scrutiny Committee receives an update presentation in 12 months' time, just to see where any of these recommendations have got to, whether they've been accepted and actioned, and any further work. So that was basically where we were with recommendations. The report was to go to Cabinet, and those were the suggestions from the TNF group of the things that we thought would benefit us all as elected members and as officers for the Vale to focus on. Now, I don't know if that, as a committee, we're prepared to send that up the line to Cabinet or not. So if we could either have a hand to move, that would be good. Thank you. Right, so I've got Councillor Carroll. Are you saying that you're moving, or are you not saying you're moving?
I wish to object, please, Chair.
Okay. So you're objecting to us sending the report back up to Cabinet for clarity? Or are you?
Yes, that's correct.
Right, okay. So how do you want to see this move? Do you want this to be a vote, or do you want to just raise your objection to the report going back to Cabinet? If you don't mind just clarifying for me. Thank you.
I'm happy to raise my objections.
Okay.
But obviously it'll be for other members to determine whether they wish to do so as well.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Goodjohn.
Sorry, I'm just trying to be productive in the whole purpose of Task and Finish is that it's cross-party and that everyone can agree to as much as possible. So are there any specific recommendations that Councillor Carroll wants to object to, and then we can agree the rest? Or does he want to object to the whole document, which I would hope, considering his comments earlier, he would not, because he had very specific things he was concerned about. I thought that overall was doing a good job.
Yes, I think Councillor Carroll has just said he wants to raise, he just wants it noted. That's what he's just clarified. That was it as far as he said. So I think we're okay to go with that. There are another two hands up. So I'm gonna before I move then off this topic, I'm gonna ask Councillor Norman and Councillor Goodjohn to come in. Councillor Norman, you come first, please.
I wish to second your proposal.
Thank you. And Councillor Emma Goodjohn?
Thanks, Chair. Will that include Councillor Goodjohn's recommendation as well?
So that was an additional recommendation. Yes, thank you. In that excitement, I haven't included this one, but yes. So this was to recommend that the topic of misinformation and disinformation and its harm is reflected in our risk register, our corporate risk register, so that they can consider formally risk mitigation for this particular topic. That was and I do apologise, and thank you for reminding me there, Councillor Goodjohn, that was separate to the report, a recommendation to make sure that it is included in the corporate risk register. So if I can have a hand to move on that, that would be helpful. Thank you both. Thank you. Okay, right then. So I think then we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6, the Corporate Resources Directorate Plan 26-27. This is year 2, where we're looking at demonstrating the performance measures and associated performance targets to deliver VALE 2030. I think we've got Tom Bowering with us tonight. Yes, we do. Lovely. Thank you, Tom. If you'd like to take us through the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Not with our chair, not with our members. I think I've got a short, and I promise it is short, set of slides to share with members this evening, which I think Matt Swindow is going to pop up on the screen. Thanks, Matt. So, as you say, Chair, this is the Corporate Resources Directorate Plan for 26-27. We're bringing these plans to all scrutiny committees this cycle from all 5 of the directorates, and the next slide just sets out a little bit of context in terms of what the purpose of the plans are. So if you could move on for me, Matt, that would be great. Thank you. So in terms of context, as members will be aware, VALE 2030, the Council's corporate plan, it's a plan for the whole of the VALE. It's key means of fulfilling our statutory obligations. It's also an intrinsic part of the performance monitoring and planning arrangements that we have as an organisation. And 5 directorate plans, this is the 2nd year of having them.
Tom, sorry, can I interrupt?
I believe there may be some slight audio issues. Was that what you were going to mention, Councillor Goodjohn?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, Tom, we seem to be losing your audio a bit. I'm not sure if there's any slight adjustments you can make at your end, just so that we may be able to have less interference on your audio.
Is that any better, Liz?
It sounds much better to me. Chair, I don't know if you think that sounds better and you'd think we should proceed.
Yeah.
Lovely.
That was clearly better. I mean, we could still hear you, but you were a little bit robot, Tom.
Well, I'm hopefully a little bit more human now.
Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect.
Great
Thank
stuff.
you.
Okay, I'll keep my camera off. It might be the signal here. So yeah, the directorate plans, this is the 2nd year that we've introduced these as being a key element of the arrangements to make sure that we are delivering on VALE 2030. They're an intrinsic and integral part of our corporate planning. We've made sure that we've tried to strengthen the alignment with the self-assessment that's undertaken annually. Members will be aware that you'll see that at joint scrutiny in the summer. And these plans are being brought forward following approval of the budget so that they more accurately reflect the resources available to us as directorates. The plans are reported to scrutiny committees on the basis of best fit, so where there's greatest alignment with the services covered. And this evening, we're seeking feedback and recommendations from yourselves to Cabinet ahead of final approval of the plans. Members will be aware as well that we publish as an organisation an annual statement setting out the main things that the Council are going to be delivering across the next year. That's going to be reported to Cabinet in May, and that will draw on the areas of focus from the self-assessment, the directorate plans, and importantly, engagement and consultation feedback in the form of resident voice. So that's the context for directorate plans. The next of the slides this evening sets out just some of the key points. So these directorate plans show the contribution that each of the 5 directorates of the Council are making to VALE 2030's 5 wellbeing objectives and the national wellbeing goals for Wales. As you said in the introduction, Chair, they set out the planned activities as well as the performance measures and associated targets where that's appropriate. Corporate resources is being reported to yourselves because of the remit of this committee. But as ever, I'm keen to make sure that all members have got access to all of the information. So you'll see in the background papers that you've got links to the other 4 directorate plans. So you've got the context if you wanted to see them. I've developed this plan in conjunction with my management team. All of the 5 plans then are moderated by the Strategy and Insight Advisory Group, and then the Chief Executive convenes a meeting with the 5 directors to make sure that across all 5 of the plans we've got sufficient coverage across the 5 wellbeing objectives, and that we are aiming to deliver the right things. And of course, ahead of bringing the plans to scrutiny committees, we ensure that the Cabinet members are happy and comfortable with what we're suggesting, and in this case it's the leader in her role as Cabinet Member for Resources and Performance. So the next slide just sets out a little bit in terms of the structure of the plans. These are really important in the sense that we use them as tools to talk with our teams and set individual and team priorities. So the background of the plan sets out who we are and what we do, as well as the purpose of the Directorate Plan. And then the main areas of focus for yourselves as elected members. Section 3 talks about managing our resources, and I'll cover that in a second. Then importantly, the actions that we'll undertake in the coming year, and then finally how we measure success. So we're bringing them to scrutiny committees this month, asking you to review the plans and endorse via recommendation the planned activities as well as the measures and targets, and of course to refer any comments and recommendations that you may have to Cabinet for their consideration prior to finalising the plans and then delivering on them. So just very briefly, on the next couple of slides, I'll take you through what's in the Directorate of Corporate Resources plan. So in terms of managing our resources, you'll see set out the key budgetary savings and reshaping information, as well as an overview of the key engagement activity that's going to be undertaken for the year. So that'll involve work on consulting on the budget in 2027, as well as undertaking the Public Services Board's 5-year wellbeing assessment. We'll be consulting on the annual self-assessment across the summer months following consideration by members, as well as a revised public participation strategy. New for 26-27, we've introduced a section within Section 3 which outlines the main or strategic partnership arrangements that the Directorate is involved in, and then finally a section around corporate and directorate risks. With corporate resources, as a directorate, we own, if you like, half of the risks which are on the Council's corporate risk register, and they're listed on the screen here. And in addition to those, we've identified 2 specific directorate risks. They relate to our capacity to respond to the changing legislative landscape. Obviously, we have the Senedd election in a month or so's time, and there will be change in terms of legislation, and also a second directorate risk around our internal capacity to transform our services at sufficient pace, as well as supporting transformation across the organisation. And taken as a package, we think that those 8 risks accurately reflect the risk environment that the Directorate is working in. The next of the slides then outlines to members some of the themes in terms of the actions that you'll see within our Directorate plan. We've got 21 actions. They're aligned with relevant FAIL 2030 commitments, and you'll see that we're going to be focusing on collaboration and community engagement, as well as delivering our commitments around Project Zero and carbon management. We'll be coordinating an integrated programme aimed at tackling poverty and inequalities, as well as undertaking some work to enhance customer experience, leading on digital transformation for the organisation, and as part of that is part rather of coordinating and delivering the Council's transformation programme, Reshaping. Members will be very aware of the work that has been underway over the last 14-15 months around strengthening scrutiny arrangements, and there's a forthcoming Audit Wales review on that, so we'll be looking to take forward those recommendations. We're also investing time and effort in improving the use of insight, so that's data and evidence to inform decision making in the organisation, as well as leading on workforce and organisational development priorities. And Cabinet will consider tomorrow the draft people strategy to take us to 2030. We'll also be establishing the new corporate landlord model from the 1st of April, and progressing our age-friendly communities action plan. So that gives members an overview of the themes of the actions that you'll see within our plan. And then the next slide just sets out some of the areas in terms of how we'll measure success. So for corporate resources, we have two sets of measures, if you like. One set is those KPIs for the organisation as a whole, and some of them exist for services specifically in corporate resources, and they're categorised in the list here in terms of citizen perspective, service user perspective, and then against finance and procurement, people KPIs, property and decarbonisation, digital measures, and scrutiny. Where it's appropriate and possible, we've set targets for members to consider this evening against those indicators. In a number of areas, they're new indicators, so sometimes we'll be looking to establish a baseline during the year. And in response to feedback from elected members, we're seeking to increase the number of measures that we've got within the framework that report on a more frequent basis than annual measures, so that when you're seeing the performance report of Q2 in committee, you've got as much data available alongside updates on actions. So that's a really quick overview of the content, and obviously happy to take any questions, and apologies that my connection was a bit patchy earlier.
Thank you, Tom. And these things happen, don't worry. Before I open up to the floor, can I just ask you a quickie, please, about the new corporate landlord function? Obviously, it's new to us at Vale of Glamorgan, and I know that it's coming in the next couple of weeks, and that we hope to save £85,000 this year from the function. Are you able to just give us a quick overview of what that actually will do, what the corporate landlord function is, and how you think we'll be able to save that much money? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. And can I just check if I'm sounding robotic or not now?
No, you're much better, much better.
Oh, okay, excellent. The wind has stopped here in Bath. Yeah, so corporate landlord is about centralising the responsibility for physical assets within the organisation. In the past, we've had a really highly devolved model where individual service directorates have been responsible for the maintenance, acquisition and operation of their individual assets. What corporate landlord is looking to do is bring those together within one single service area. The approach means that we can take a more strategic one across the estate, making sure that we are properly looking at making the best value for money decisions in terms of any investment in the operation of those assets, and making sure that we're making as much in terms of efficiency as we can do is ultimately the goal. It also means that we hopefully will be able to enhance the condition and suitability of those assets. And in terms of where we're at now, we are currently consulting with colleagues on the new structure for the corporate landlord model. As part of doing that, we've had the opportunity to be able to review the structure that is required. As part of that, we are conscious of the financial envelope that we've got available to us, so minus that £85,000. We've also got the ability in bringing those assets together to look at how individual budgets are most effectively and efficiently being used. And as a result of that, we're looking to deliver that £85,000 across the next 12 months.
Thank you, Tom. That was really helpful. Councillor Goodjohn, would you like to come in? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. 4 points from me, most of which are questions. So I'll rattle off the easy ones first. Action 1, the town and community councils. Can I ask if there's going to be a focus on work to redevelop relationships with town and community councils? I think I said this last year as well, but I think it's one sector where our relationships as a council overall has been most strained is with our town and community councils over the past few years. And I would love some enhanced focus on ensuring that we can start to rebuild those relationships across the Vale. I'll give you them one at a time, Tom. I think that'll be easier. So you're welcome to respond to that.
You're being very kind, Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you. Absolutely, town and community councils are a really important partner for us, and it was a real opportunity to be able to talk to One Voice Wales colleagues over the last few months, talking about the partnership statement, which is in Vale 2030, setting out our commitment to work more closely with partners such as town and community councils. We've also had some really productive discussions with the 4 town councils as part of the council's work on placemaking. And I think it's fair to say that, yes, at times relations can be strained between different tiers of government, but actually I think that process with the 4 towns in particular has been a really productive one and has opened up new opportunities for us. We're also having some discussions with some of the community councils in the Western Vale who are keen to explore different ways of working with us as an organisation. And so certainly a focus on that relationship is really important. We're going to be exploring whether we renew the charter between the principal and the town and community councils in the most appropriate time to do that. And I'm pleased that the council's monitoring officer continues to meet on a regular basis with the clerks of each of the community councils in order to be able to provide support and guidance to them. So I think there are some firm foundations upon which we can build. There's some really good evidence in terms of us taking that work forward constructively, and of course there's always more that we can do, and that's what this action is seeking to deliver over the next 12 months.
Thank you, Tom. Before you come back in, Ewan, I just wanted to quickly just come back to that point of relationships with community councils, and just I'm asking us, please, certainly with our Western Vale community councils, the Boundary Commission's review has meant that from 4 community councils now there will be 2. It's not been terribly warmly accepted, this change, and I think we just need to reflect on that and double down on the support that we give them through this quite difficult and challenging period where the community councils and the boundaries and the definition and the new organisations that are having to be developed, where there was once 2 and now there's 1. We need to really support them on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's an important point. It's really important that we rebuild those relationships, and I agree the placemaking plans have been a great start. Can I ask about Action 24? Some of the points that were raised in the procurement task and finish group recommendations are included in there, but can I just confirm that all the recommendations from the procurement task and finish will be considered either as part of that action or other actions in the directorate plan?
Really straightforward answer to that one, Councillor Goodjohn, and the answer is yes. Many of those recommendations have already been reflected on. I know when we took the revised procurement strategy back through Cabinet in parallel with that task and finish group, there was a firm commitment to have updated it in many areas to reflect the recommendations that this committee have made, and the remaining ones that are outstanding, which require some particular focus, are the ones that are set out within the directorate plan for the coming year. So absolutely.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to compliment the new performance indicators and the robust nature of this directorate plan. I think it's wide-ranging and quite ambitious, but not overly so. I wanted to ask about when we're reviewing our actions and our performance indicators to review our overall performance, how we're considering the importance of different actions in future. I know that at joint performance scrutiny in past, we've been struggling with the fact that we have a red, amber, green system when it comes to actions and performance indicators, but often it does not reflect the fact that many actions can be statutory measures and some of them can be less important than others when they are not statutory. And so it would be really interesting to know if there's any thoughts in future when we're reviewing this directorate plan on trying to give some kind of semblance as to how critical to our usual operations the different actions within the directorate plan are.
Thanks, Councillor Goodjohn. It's a really good question, actually, because as you rightly say, we often in the performance reports talk at a summary level in terms of the overall number of actions or measures that are red, amber and green, and that seems to suggest that all actions and measures are equal, and of course they're not. I think, as I often say when presenting performance, that's an illustrative picture and needs us to drill down into the detail. Certainly, what I can do, if committee would be minded for us to do this as a recommendation, is we could reflect on how we could tease some of that out in terms of how we present exceptions to yourselves as members, and also how we present it in that sort of overall context of the performance reports. It is always tricky to do it, but I completely take the sentiment behind the question, and I think we could do some more work to maybe assist in that regard.
I think that would be very helpful, Tom, and I hope other committee members would feel the same, that if you look at it and see where you think that we can go from there, it'd be interesting what you come out with, and we can review if that works or not at future meetings. The final thing was just on the directorate risks. Now, one of the opportunities of being on multiple scrutiny committees and reviewing multiple of these now standardised documents is acknowledging the different ways that directorates use their directorate risks in order to focus the minds in the directorate towards mitigating them. And I'd note that in many other directorate plans, we have a lot more directorate risks that are drilled down versions of the corporate risks, which focus on specific issues that occur within the directorate that need to be focused on. And I note that in these directorate risks, there are only two, and they are very important ones, but I can think of quite a few which would come to mind for me that are very specific to corporate resources, which I would expect typically to be reflected in a directorate risk plan. So my ask is, do you think that it is currently working, the directorate risks, and ask how it came to be this way, and ask, would you consider reviewing it just to see if it's still the correct direction to only have two directorate risks, bearing in mind that you also take responsibility for so many corporate risks?
Thank you, Councillor Goodwin, and I think it's a fair challenge when you look across all five of the plans, and corporate resources has got two, and others have got lots of specific risks. In terms of how we came about identifying those two risks, I ran a session with all of my extended management team, so colleagues who are operational managers, heads of service from across the directorate, looking at the areas of challenge, the areas of risk, and the areas of opportunity that they see within their individual services, and we mapped those back thematically, and I saw all of those predominantly being reflected within the corporate risks for which we're responsible for managing the mitigation plans for. So colleagues were talking about issues of capacity, for example. They were also talking about some specific areas of recruitment and retention challenges, as well as obviously delivering a balanced budget and being able to support the organisation to do that, as well as some of the digital transformation work and our work on assets. And I think that's what led us as a leadership team to identifying those two other risks, which we felt were more specific to us as a directorate team in terms of that legislation, and also the ability to support ourselves and others to transform. And those risks, along with the actions themselves, which are in the plan, we felt were the ones that were tackling the most acute challenges, risks, however you want to phrase it. So for me, it feels that they do adequately cover things. My colleagues within individual service areas will also be doing a similar piece of work, so they'll be looking at reflecting their own risk profile within individual against those corporate and couple of directorate risks. So I'm comfortable that it's robust, but I was certainly happy to take another look prior to Cabinet if the comments are going to Cabinet, and they'll obviously want to get a view before reaching a decision on them.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. You've still got your hand up. Do you want to come back in on what Tom has said, or are you
Yeah,
okay?
can I just ask for the 2 recommendations then
Yep.
to Cabinet? The first one on the way
Teasing
that
out
we
exceptions, yeah?
tease out exceptions and the priorities on actions, and the second one on reviewing the directorate risks.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Councillor Emma Goodjohn, please come in.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to second those recommendations. But also, I would just like to say I'm really happy to see the perspectives headings for measuring our performance. I was really pleased to see that. But going back to the corporate landlord topic, I'm just checking. I'd just like to know that volunteers are still going to be supported with this new way of working.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And in terms of volunteers continuing to be supported, where they are involved in the operation of any assets which will come under the control, if you like, of the corporate landlord, absolutely. And I think you'll see as well within the Directorate Plan, there's a real commitment to strengthening communities as part of the reshaping programme, that working with people within communities. So absolutely, volunteering is a really important and valued part of our work. And yes, we will certainly be looking to support volunteers. For example, those who are on management committees of community centres, for example, would be a good one within scope of corporate landlord.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. Did you say there was a consultation at the moment? Is there a way we can feed into this at the moment, or?
The consultation is with the staff members involved who would be within scope of transferring into the new service. So it's a consultation on the structure and the individual roles rather than the overall kind of concept of corporate landlord. But elected members certainly would be able to feed into the way that corporate landlord operates as part of the annual corporate asset management plan, which usually comes to your committee, I think, just after the summer recess. So certainly be able to see the activities that are underway, the areas of focus, and be able to provide your feedback in terms of the direction that the service is taking as part of that plan.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Emma Goodjohn, and thank you, Tom. Yes, we look forward to finding a little bit more about corporate landlord and how you're getting on in the months to come. Councillor Johnson, please ask your question.
Diolch hefyd.
Thank you. I'm also interested in the corporate landlord after it has been established, but a couple of short questions in relation to the cuts in proposed savings in this document. One relates to Welsh language translation. I'm just interested to know how this will be implemented within a year to 27-28, and there again with the cut in the role of the mayor and what the implications are for this. Thank you, Tom.
Diolch, Councillor Johnson. Thank you. Certainly, in terms of the corporate landlord, we have committed to providing an update report to Cabinet. What I can do is make sure that we put a recommendation in that's at least circulated, or maybe the form of a briefing or brought to this committee, because I know it's something that a number of colleagues have raised this evening. In terms of those couple of proposed savings, the Welsh language translation one, we have a saving against Welsh language translation translation in this current financial year. That's as a result of adopting the use of Amazon Web Translation in the communications team, and we've been slowly rolling that out in other areas of the organisation. We've done it in quite a considered way, I think, because we were very keen to make sure that the quality of that translation was appropriate, and the purpose of taking that approach has been now to give ourselves a year to properly evaluate it. It's currently only available for use by people who can speak and read in Welsh fluently, so that they can check the copy that is translated. So over the next 12 months, we're going to be evaluating that and looking at how we can potentially roll that out in a wider context. So the saving that is in the 27-28 financial year is currently a projection based on that work. So it's almost kept as a pin to make sure that we don't lose focus and something else comes along that takes our eye off the ball. We want to make sure that there's that proper foundational work undertaken in this year coming. In terms of the role of the Mayor, that budget reduction is very similar to a number of budget adjustments that we made in 25-26 in corporate resources and in the council's general policy budget, where we've looked at the trend of expenditure over a number of years and identified areas of underspend where there's been consistent levels of underspend, and the saving that is within the directorate plan is simply a reflection of the trend in use of the budget by the Mayor in recent years. So we've looked to realign it to more accurately reflect the expenditure that's being incurred. So there should be no noticeable difference in terms of the operation of that office as a result of making that saving.
Okay. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Thank you, Tom. Do we have any other members who'd like to ask a question? No? Okay, that's great. So if we move then on to the recommendations, we were being asked as a committee to endorse the Corporate Resources Directorate Plan. That was Appendix A, and the associated measures and performance targets for 26-27. We've got a couple of additional recommendations also that we want to just squeeze in. One which was on how we tease out exceptions. One was on a review of the number of directorate risks. Bearing in mind at the moment there's only 2. Appreciate, Tom, that you feel that's that has been tested, but we'd like you to just take a second look, if you don't mind. And also, I think a couple of us have said, so we just want to, and you've also said, Tom, that it's possible, we want to see the returned report that will go to Cabinet on the embedding of the new corporate landlord structure. So if everybody's happy with those recommendations, can I have a hand to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Marvellous. And Councillor Lovelock-Edwards, great. So if we now move then on to our next agenda item, it's a reference from Cabinet from the 26th of February. It's our quarter 3 revenue monitoring from 25-26. And I think we've got Matt, who's going to just give us a quick review. Yes, he's here. Thank you, Matt.
Even though I'll just give it a brief introduction. So this is the quarter 3 monitoring that takes us up to 31st of December. So based on expenditure on the first 3 quarters, but forecasting to the end of the year. The position at the moment projects unplanned use of reserves of £3.1 million. 2 million of that, though, is met from the budget risk reserve that we put in place. Balance currently shown against the council's general fund. It's a similar ongoing story to previous reports. The council continued to experience pressures in children's and adult services, including the council's own run care homes. Pressures also reported regarding school transport and a lag in delivery of the savings programme, especially some challenging ones in social services and also corporate resources and neighbourhood services too. We're also experiencing pressures relating to operational highways, and that's predominantly around road maintenance costs. The 26/7 budget allocates additional cost pressures to a number of these areas, but that's one of the key reasons why we bring the Q3 monitoring alongside the draft budget proposals in February each year, so the two are in sync. It is a slight improvement. We do have a slight improvement on the school's position. We've obviously talked about that at some length this evening, but given the criticality of it, it's important that I repeat some of that here in this introduction. You'll have picked up earlier that it is a bit of a moving picture. So when we wrote the report for the February meeting, the cumulative deficit was at 14.67. But I know when I briefed the leader to introduce it at cabinet, the position was then 13.6. And you've seen this evening that that's eased back a little bit further, but we're still awaiting the year-end position to clarify the exact position. The report does set out the responsibility of school governing bodies to set a balanced budget for their schools, and also the steps that local authorities can take to manage the school deficit budget, and they're set out in the report. You'll have heard earlier that the Director of Learning Skills has worked extensively with schools and the governing bodies to help develop the plans to address the deficits. But we do still have a number of schools with really high irrecoverable deficits. Director of Learning Schools has been meeting on a regular basis with the Chief Exec and myself and the leader, and this dates back to September. Those meetings have been ongoing as we look how to address the situation. And you'll have also heard this evening that 7 schools of greatest concern came into the civic offices in January to discuss this financial positions, and there's ongoing discussions with those. There's a real diverse range of issues that those schools are facing individually. There's also support being provided to schools with smaller deficits, albeit that the focus needs to be on those at greatest variation. The savings position has improved since moving on to savings. The savings position has improved since the position reported in Q2, with a higher percentage of the savings achieved or mitigated in year, so that's positive. Reserves, this is a real critical area for the council too. The level of reserves is projected to reduce significantly in year, but it is likely to be reprofiled slightly due to capital expenditure slippage and emerging grant income that we receive even at this late stage of the year. There have been, and this was set out in detail in the budget report as well, because of the level of increase in the net overall deficits in school, it's been necessary to do further work on the council's own reserves and make sure that the level of school deficits is matched on the balance sheet. So we can't write them off, but they need to be underwritten. So that's the real highlights of the report, and as ever, I'm more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Carroll's got his hand up straight away, so I'll bring him in if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for the presentation. It's a question in relation to the highways overspend, particularly regarding the expenditure on carriageway patching. Members may be aware that my constituent, Julian Morgan, has launched a petition on the council's website regarding highway repairs, potholes, and road resurfacing. And he's among the things that report, that petition calls for, include investment and exploration of new technologies. He talks about the JCB Pothole Pro, which is a piece of equipment that I know other authorities across the country have used. I know that the council's contractors have that equipment and use it. My question, though, given the pressures that road maintenance puts on the budget, and this may touch on capital expenditure rather than revenue, I accept that, but it's just a question as to whether any exploration has been done as to the costs and benefits of bringing this service in-house rather than contracting it out, because obviously contractual work is not cheap. And so I'd like to see some analysis of that to see whether the authority could get better value for money and better service by pursuing a different approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I don't know if we've lost Matt, or I think we've lost Matt for a minute. I mean,
He's
the
still
concept
connected,
of...
Chair, just to let you know.
Oh, he is there, is he? Okay.
He's connected.
Concept.
Well, we can give him a moment, but I can try and help him if he needs any assistance.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the concept of insourcing a service is one that, you know, is always worth considering, but whether that's something that Matt can answer, it might be specific for that particular department. But whilst we see if he comes back in, I can see that the leader has come on board. So would you like to come in, leader, just at this point, if Councillor Johnson doesn't mind?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think a couple of things. We were talking about mis and disinformation earlier, and I know I've seen stuff in social media in relation to potholes. You said we only did 210 last year, or we did over 14,000. But the point is that when you're talking about insourcing or outsourcing, there's an authority. We prefer to insource, but you have to look at the economies and efficiencies. And quite often, road resurfacing is something that you do in the sort of summer months, etc. Potholes is very much weather dependent. That they tend to spawn when it's cold and wet, but we can't mend them permanently in that weather. So you need work surface at different times of the year, and that is what the contracting companies do. I also need to say that in terms of the Pothole Pro, yes, our contractor has one, and actually it was out in Penarth recently. So, you know, as we were talking about earlier, don't believe everything that you read on social media, regardless of how authentic the source may be. But I'm sure that we would be able to get you an appraisal of why it is more cost effective for us to work with trusted contractors. Thank you.
Thank you, leader. So Councillor Carroll will ask for an appraisal if that's okay with you, and see if we can get you know, a comparison as to why it's more cost effective to keep it with the contractors. But
yes, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's a good idea. Councillor Johnson, do you want to come back in?
Diolch. Gobeithio.
Thank you. Hopefully Matt can now hear me. Just have a couple of questions in relation to spend and expenditure. Just one thing to note based on the question from Councillor Carroll is, of course, last night in the Place Committee, there was a lively discussion in relation to the highways resurfacing plan and some of the similar questions which were raised there. But in terms of the spend up until the end of Q3, I was just wanted a bit of confirmation from Matt in particular in relation to the delays in terms of overspend in relation to the docks offices in Barry, and also an explanation of what they call the line that they call council fund housing, where there is a deficit or which has arisen in year. I just wanted a bit of understanding in relation to those two aspects, and also additional to that, what's happening in relation to social care, especially in light of the continual increase in the number of children in care. Because it doesn't feel like it's part of the same message as I receive as a member of the corporate panel. So if Matt could explain, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Have we got Matt back with us? Yes, I think we do.
Or maybe not.
Or maybe not. He disappeared briefly there. Matt, if you can hear us, please come back.
Fel y restr yma, mae dal...
From the list, he seems to still be connected to the call. But perhaps he can't hear us, I don't know.
Hearing us, and maybe that's the reason why he's not appearing on screen. I'll try and contact him outside of the meeting and see if we can get him reconnected properly. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Matt, can you hear us?
I'm unable to contact Matt at the moment, Chair. I don't know if it's possible to perhaps move along at all. Oh, yeah, sorry, I am. He can hear us. So Matt, if you could come back in now, please, that would be great. Hopefully you didn't miss too much when you were reconnecting.
Wnaeth Matt.
Did Matt hear anything that I said? Or is it needed, or is it possible for me to repeat what I said?
Apologies, I'm not sure what's been happening. I've been here all
We've got a
along.
few questions for you, Matt, from Councillor Johnson, which you might not have heard. So,
Yeah, I've heard all the questions, I believe.
oh, brilliant. That's lovely. If you could just respond, that would be
One about the
wonderful.
Doc's office, one about housing,
Council fund housing,
and one about social care.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Doc's office one is about the saving that's built into the budget. There's a reasonable saving put in the budget 2 years ago based on the proposals around the levelling up fund, and the council being able to exit the offices and bring a third party in to run that as an incubator. That's all been delayed, but the saving is baked into the corporate resources budget. The last couple of years, the director has attempted to meet that by underspends across the rest of the directorate, but that's been a particular challenge for us. The council fund housing, could you say what the specific issue was on that, please? And also, before you do, on the social care, I would imagine I'll need to come back on more detail on that one. Certainly in this Q3 The overall social care position isn't much change from Q2, but what we have seen is further pressure, similar to the first couple of quarters, coming through on children's social care, albeit the pressures on adult social care eased back a little bit.
Okay.
Hope that's helpful.
Right. Diolch am y
Thank you for the response in relation to social care. I was expecting more detail, but we might see the situation at the end of the financial year, which is next week. But in table 10, Environment and Housing Q3, there is a line in the budget referring to council fund housing, and this states, or it shows, a deficit of 1.6 million, and I just wanted a little bit of an explanation in relation to what that budget line is. Why is this as a percentage? It seems to be quite large in terms of the outturn in comparison with the original budget.
digon.
Is that clear enough?
Yeah, so I've got table 10 in front of me, and the council fund housing, the variance of 1.6 million, 1.16 million. So I'll need to get back to you on the specifics of that. So apologies, I haven't got that information in front of me.
Diolch, Matt.
Thank you. I wasn't sure what the line in the budget referred to, so if that could be explained, then perhaps that will be more clear for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, and I'm sure Matt will come back to you with those with a bit more information on those ones. Do we have anybody else who'd like to ask some questions on the revenue monitoring? No? Okay, that's great. So I think the recommendation for us was that this report and the financial measures taken to be considered, which we have.
Chair, I've just lost your audio, unfortunately. I'm not sure if that's happened for anyone else, only in the last moment or so.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Do you want me to start again on the recommendations, Liz?
That'd be helpful.
Because I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start again. So the recommendations were for committee to consider the contents of the report and the financial measures that have been taken, which we have done. There was an individual recommendation that came from Councillor Carroll, where he asked, which the leader said we could do, which was an appraisal, just to compare the difference in costing if we were to try to insource the road maintenance work, as opposed to what we've got now, the status quo of contracting out. If that's possible, that would be great. We would like to see that. And there were a couple of things that Matt has said he's going to get back for Councillor Johnson. So can I have a hand, please, to move on that one? Thank you, Councillor Emma Good-John and Councillor Johnson. Marvellous. Okay, everybody, moving on to the last agenda item, which is another reference from Cabinet from the 26th of February. This is our capital monitoring 6-monthly report, covering the period from the 1st of April to the 31st of December. And I think it's back over to Matt Balmer with a quick introduction. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Similar to the revenue, this covers the period to 31st of December, so the first 3 quarters of the financial year, and forecasts the position to the year end. At the time of writing the report, the approved programme was £102 million, and there are a number of requests to amend the programme, and if those are approved, they were approved actually at Cabinet. The revised forecast outturns projected to be £90.8 million. Spend to the end of December was £40 million, so there's some way to go in the last quarter. Appendix 1 details financial progress on the programme to the end of December by scheme, and then Appendix 2 sets it out by directorate, the changes from the approved proposals back in March 2025 when Council approved the capital programme. So that includes movements in year, including slippages and additions, and demonstrates the journey to the revised forecast. So a real good trail there. Appendix, one further note, schemes over £250,000, and as we've been doing this financial year, we've been given a risk rating and comment. The schemes that are coloured green, amber and red to indicate the level of risk, where green's the lowest and red the highest, as is common approach. The categorisation of the schemes is detailed in the report. We're continuing to closely monitor the budget through the year to identify overspends and slippage. The slippage is significant again this quarter, £12.1 million. It's detailed then in the body of the report in paragraphs 2.33 onwards. So there's quite a bit of detail covering the reasons for the slippage and where that is. The report also details all the recent delegated authority requests that have been approved, and also notes the use of emergency powers which were taken between the half year and the third quarter reports. As usual in the report, we highlight a couple of schemes that have been delivered. So this quarter there's the active travel grant, so the Vale Schools bike fleet, and also the Welsh Government Brilliant Basics grant for toilet refurbishment at country park destinations. So the active travel grant, a modest 30k, but nevertheless it's been able to provide bikes and storage to schools that have completed their active travel school plans and conducted pilot timed school street closures. And then the Welsh Government Brilliant Basics grant for toilet refurbishment has been at Cosmoston and Porthcurry country parks, together with also solar installation at Cosmoston. The toilet facilities at Cosmoston Lakes were completed early in the year, and they were opened back in January. The report also requests several amendments to the programme. Some of the larger items are slippage of £3 million within the housing improvement programme, slippage of £1.5 million on the levelling up fund, and there's also the inclusion of schemes following a review of revenue expenditure over 10k, which is our de minimis for capital expenditure. They amount to 93k in total. The reduction in the 20 mile an hour grant scheme budget, that's been reduced by 174k following an exercise to project to the year end. The report further requests the 25/6 programme is amended to reflect the revised leases arrangement that have or are due to commence in 2025/6 that meet the threshold for inclusion under the new International Financial Reporting Standard 16. So that's all I was going to say by way of introduction, but still proving a challenging capital programme to deliver for the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for that review of the report. Do we have anybody who'd like to ask questions? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Please come in. Thank you.
And gloi iawn.
Very quickly, Chair. Just wanted to confirm the council has bought Wilco's in Barry with a capital grant, and any development or work to the building will come out of the capital or revenue account in future. So that was the main question that I had this evening. Obviously, there's a lot of slippage once again. From the current financial year to the next, as we expect at this time of year, but just as I was speaking, I'd like to welcome the investment in Pen-y-Garth, Ysgol Pen-y-Garth, in early years care, because I remember that this was something that was rejected by Welsh Government in the past, so it is nice to see that this is coming into the capital plan now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Matt, could you come back in on Councillor Johnson's first question about Wilco's? Thank you.
Yeah, so I do know the regeneration team are working on future proposals on the Wilkinson site, and we'll bring you an update when we have more on that. So there's nothing I can add this evening.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody else with any other questions on capital monitoring? No? Okay, everybody, let's move on to the recommendations then. They were that committee considers the report, and that was that the approved programme at its final proposal was 106.706 million. There was slippage from 24-25 from the capital programme of 14.329 million. That was previously agreed, and then it was added to this approved programme. And during the financial year, amendments totaling 11.714 million and slippage of 30.639 million were approved. And that now gives us a total current approved programme, as Matt's already explained, of 102.110 million. If we're all happy with that, if I can have a hand to move. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. If we move then swiftly on to the next agenda item, which are any urgent matters, part 1. I haven't got any for you. And the next agenda item 10, which are the press exclusion, any items that are urgent, part 2. There are none. So that just leaves me with the position of saying thank you to everybody for your contributions. Thank you for the 2 hours and 42 minutes of your time tonight, and anybody else who stayed with us. The date for the next meeting, do we have that, Liz? I should probably know, but I like to ask you.
That's fine. Bear with me because it's in May. I'll just get it up now.
It will be, yes.
It's hard to sometimes think about the next municipal year when we're just coming to the end of this one, but I do have it on my desktop, so I'm just going to confirm so I don't get it wrong.
Fi'n credu mae'n dweud.
I think it says the 27th of May.
Was that the 26th?
27th of May.
27th,
Thank you
sorry.
both. Great.
Thank you. So it's the 27th of May, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you then. Have a really nice evening, all. Thank you. All. Bye.